Yeah. Thank you for accommodating this. So, yeah, I'm having a little bit of technical issues launching the stream from that initial link, and just doesn't seem to work. There must be a calendar that I need to click when I start the live stream, and I can select the pre-scheduled ones, but it just doesn't work. So, it's a grayed out.
Okay.
Sorry for that. So, my guest today is Gary Pillion. This is an amazing and very well-rounded person that I'm surprised was hidden from the world for so long. So I'm really, really happy to introduce Gary to the public today. And so to introduce Gary, there is a whole list of super interesting things that I actually put together in a very cohesive story about the person. So Gary has 12 years experience with self-study, utilizing diet and lifestyle modifications to heal various diseases. So we will hear another story of how a person didn't give up, didn't settle, and found the keys to their well-being and health. This is one thing. So after you have kind of healed yourself, after you've seen the progress in healing yourself, you started exploring a deep passion for cultivating vitality. So you start expanding further to this plus, to this high potential life. And you started exploring the realms of the vitality and wellness that was previously inaccessible to you, which is also very, very cool. So now about your qualifications. You're a certified iridologist. This is my first time ever meeting a person in real life who is into this field. This is a fascinating thing, and I'm really curious to learn more about it. And I'm convinced that our guests will also be super curious about this subject. And I will give you a chance to talk more about it in your own expert words. So you're also a certified regenerative detoxification counselor, which is also an interesting field of study. Oh, there's a handful. You also teach horticulture and mindfulness at an elementary school, and you also serve as a foodscaper at Island Harvest, a company that uses organic practices rooted in an understanding and respect for nature's complex systems. This is also a field that I'm personally passionate about, so I'm also really excited to learn about it. And I also understand the importance of this activity, so super excited. And what you do within this framework, you build, plant, and maintain edible landscapes where people can nurture the bond with their food and the food at home grow and the land. And then you also connect it to the ecology of growing their own food at home. So, in terms of raw food as well, you have also background in that. You have been eating vegan for 4 years and raw vegan for 2 years. And you currently live on the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, with your rescue dog, Blue. And you enjoy singing, surfing, creating, and travel. So this is quite a handful of experiences and facets of your personality. So let's start our conversation. It's you all like you seem everything seems to fit so perfectly together. I don't know if you have anything to add here to your introduction.
No, that's a great introduction. And yeah, I agree. It's really starting to all weave together the different things I'm interested in and learning about. It's cool to see the commonalities and things.
Hmm. Amazing. So I will probably start with actually the farming practices. So as a raw foodist, I personally had to understand the properties of plants, right? You start researching where can you harvest your nutrition, and then inevitably came across the information about deterioration of soil, how plants are no longer the plants we would want them to be. So they no longer carry the nutrition that are in some table from table values, let's say generated like 50, 70 years ago. And in fact, yeah, we just cannot trust that plants have everything that we expect them to have. Could you tell us horticulture and regenerative gardening or even farming actually differ from the intensive farming practices that produce most of the food accessible to people nowadays?
Sure. Yeah. So modern agriculture relies heavily on using chemicals to kind of mitigate different pests, also called insects that are just, like us, trying to find something to eat. Um, and they utilize a lot of monoculture, so growing a lot of the same type of food all in one place. And this is really unnatural. And nature knows this, and it's a very delicate system that they're creating that's very prone to being feasted on by all different types of things in nature, whether it's a fungus or an insect or actually like a mammal or an animal. So that's a very delicate system to try to maintain. And then not only that, but they utilize a lot of soil disturbance to try to get the plants up out of the ground, get it prepared for planting next. And that also is really unnatural. There is a lot of different things in the soil, like a biome, so to speak, kind of like our gut biome. And the more that we mess around with that, the more it's going to struggle. So, those are two things that modern agriculture really kind of misses the mark with kind of their major flaws. And they're also really reliant on external inputs. So, whether it's trying to mitigate the pests or the insects that are coming in, but they're also really reliant on their fertilizers. So trying to like kind of spoon feed nutrients and what the plant is looking for. That is also a really delicate system because if you can't get those external inputs in, the plants are going to suffer. And it's just really energy intensive trying to get those things in. So those are kind of the top three that I wanted to reflect on. There's a lot that they could do to improve, but those three things, monoculturing, relying heavily on like chemical inputs and external inputs, and then also soil disturbance are some of the main things that are really kind of harming the environment in the name of growing food.
Yeah, I heard, you know what, that there is a pretty much near the surface, there will be several layers of soil. And in order for the soil to function properly, I don't know what specific chemicals are being generated through that, but in the topmost layer, there will be aerobic bacteria and there will be anaerobic bacteria a little bit deeper. And if you rotate the soil, then you bring the layer that is supposed to be uh, rich in anaerobic bacteria, you bring it to the air. So anaerobic bacteria just dies. So you remove those bacteria. And then when you swap aerobic bacteria and put them down, they won't have air. So they also will wither. So I heard about this aspect. Another thing that I heard of is that modern agriculture literally just supplies what, like three minerals to the soil, something to just make a plant survive, not thrive by any means.
Yeah,
And this leads to us also getting very inferior nutrition from those.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And I think the abbreviation's NPK, so nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Yeah,
yeah.
the plant will live, it'll look like it's growing and things will, it'll produce fruit and whatnot, but like how nutrient rich could it have been if the soil was honored and respected in the way that like our ancestors have? Kind of in addition to what you were speaking on turning the soil and moving the bacteria from a place where it doesn't want to be to a place where it can't thrive.
Mhm.
It's also, we're learning so much more about the mycorrhizal fungus that lives in the earth. And once you start learning about this, it's just so cool and exciting to kind of comprehend what's actually happening down there. And the gist of it is that there's a mycorrhizal network of fungus that is just all over the place under the ground. And when you rip the soil up, you're kind of breaking down the highways and the bridges and the roads that they've built. So plants produce, it's like one thing that I can't stress enough is once you start to grow your own food, you start to learn like the abundance that really happens in nature. So
Mhm.
plants produce more sugars than they actually need. and they trade it. And I was trying to find the scientific term for this because I know your science background and it's a really fun word. So maybe one of our listeners can help us out with this, but I know the basis of it, but the term is a fun one. But the plants trade sugar at their roots with the fungus or the mold or, the mycorrhizal, and in turn the mycorrhizal give them nutrients that they're tapped into. So although your plant might be planted right here, maybe the roots have spread a little bit, if they're tapped into networks of fungus in the ground, they can be tapping into nutrients that are like 10, 20, 30, who knows, maybe 80 feet away. So that when you honor that and you respect that and you stop disturbing the soil, you really can make such more nutrient rich food and such more happy plants.
Mhm. So I know that, yeah, there are symbiotic. If we look even at the trees, there is symbiosis between trees and certain. I forgot how it's called, but it's a plant that is crossbreed between moss and seaweed, kind of. So it's like characterized by both, and there is symbiotic relationship between that, and also actually linguistically in Russia we have several macrofungi, so like normal mushrooms, edible mushrooms that
Mhm.
are called after the trees that they grow under. So you will always find them only under the trees of specific kind. So if
Uh,
you go to the forest that has like predominantly those trees, you just go and you can find those mushrooms, and they actually bear the name of the tree that they grow under. So there are we studied that in biology class, the symbiotic relationship between trees and those mushrooms, or trees and moss, or that other plant that quite climbs over the tree. That, yeah, they have this trade of nutrients, but I never knew that it applies actually in the farming, in the gardening, that you can actually. I never thought about this underground network and underground fungi cultures that live there. So it's really fascinating. But how do you make sure that you don't disturb it? Because like imagine you have I don't know, in general, like how how are your practices organized? Like how do
sure.
you blend? How do you nurture? How do you like do all that stuff? Like
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I guess the term, if someone wanted to start researching on their own, is to look up no-dig, no-till growing. That's kind of the name for what it is. And one of the OG people, one of the originals that really was pioneering this and sharing it, I mean, of course, was like our ancestors, but someone kind of more in modern times was is still alive. His name's Charles Dowding. It's Dowding, Charles Dowding. And he's a really cool guy that actually lives in a pretty similar climate that I'm in, but just across the Atlantic Ocean. And the premise of it is basically things thrive in a forest. The forest does not need any external inputs. The forest does not need your help to thrive. It just thrives. And
mhm,
there's constantly biomass falling from above, whether it's pine needles, leaves, nuts, seeds. There's all kinds of things falling, and they break down and they feed what's in the soil. So rather than trying to feed our plants, we really should be thinking about feeding the soil that our plants are in. So if you wanted to incorporate this into your own garden, you basically each year and around this time of the year, you add compost to the top of all of your growing areas. And this kind of replicates a forest just naturally accumulating all kinds of beautiful biomass and things that all the microbes and the worms and everything down there will feast upon. And they'll come up and they'll bring it right down into the soil. You don't need to like till it in or anything like that.
mhm,
So that's a really important part of no dig is adding compost each year. And then really it's just a matter of keeping the plants watered. If you live in an area where it's really hot and there's a lot of respiration, a lot of water is coming up out of the soil, you can incorporate different types of mulching. Some people use like, man-made materials like some type of plastic mesh. I tend to use just what's kind of on my property, so you can mulch things with wood chips or leaves or grass clippings, and that kind of helps keep the moisture in the ground. And then as a bonus, it'll just keep breaking down and keep feeding your plants probably the next year. So that's a pretty cool input that's you can get right from where you are. And then the more you get tapped into this, you can create a compost pile. and you can put your grass clippings, your leaves. If you can shred your leaves, that's even better. If you can run them over with a lawnmower or shred them somehow,
Hmm.
those composted, mix your food in, avoiding putting meat or dairy or like citrus. Some tropical fruits don't break down super well, but you basically just make your input right there, right next to where you're growing, and then that will just keep breaking down. And then the next growing season, that'll be your compost that you'll top dress with again. And then when it comes around to harvesting, you harvest, harvest, harvest. And then eventually when the plant is done, and if you need to take it down, you can't just like leave a decaying plant sitting there. I mean, you could, but ideally what we do is we just cut the top of the soil line and we keep all those roots in the ground, ideally. And then those roots will stay down there and just keep breaking down and feeding other plants.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's interesting. You're mentioning the leaves because um, I know that leaves they carry. The trees have like some grandiose roots. They go so deep. So leaves are actually this natural fertilizer that actually contains the minerals from the deepest levels of fertile soil. So they are probably seem to be the most powerful fertilizer in terms of resupplying the minerals. And another thing is that when they decay, they also it's like exothermic reaction. So they produce a lot of heat, so they keep the soil kind of warm. So it's probably good for it's called perennials, right? That grow several years,
Yeah.
right? The ones
Yeah.
that stay. But I know that there are lots of concerns. And I remember my parents, they have a garden. And we used, for example, we have a garden, right? And we have weeds growing. So would mulch would just block the weeds that we didn't want. And we just lay them flat. And under the sun, they just dry down and no, become fertilizer eventually. But with leaves, when I brought it up, my parents were saying that oh, if you put leaves, just fallen leaves in the garden, they become like harbor for some parasites, for some like bacterial infestations. So they were kind of scared to fertilize with leaves because they were concerned about some unwanted consequences of that. Is it the general concern, or is there a way to do it right, to do it properly? You say that you should shred the leaves if possible.
Yeah, yeah. So ideally, whatever we mulch with, ideally it would be composted already. So
Hmm.
it would have been sitting in a pile. It would have been heating up like you described. That's a really important process that can actually like kill a lot of things that we don't really want to put back into our garden. So ideally, we use composted mulch. But if you do use fresh, like for example, if you use fresh wood chips, you could put it right on the top of the soil and it would be okay. But as soon as you start mixing fresh wood that hasn't broken down, that is an example of normally we want a lot of nitrogen in the ground. That fresh material will actually start pulling from the soil to break down. So that could actually pull nitrogen out of your soil. And you wouldn't really want that especially on a huge scale. If it just kind of happened a little bit somewhere, you might not really suffer too much. But yeah, your parents were right to be wary. It's important that it's composted. That's ideal because then it's already kind of been pre-digested for the soil, so the soil can just take it right in.
I see. So I can, for example, if I let's say I buy a property with a forest on it, right? Can I just like put tomato bushes somewhere without any pre-processing of the soil? Or do you think I would need to kind of cultivate the area a little bit for bringing some cultured plants to it?
Yeah, yeah. So Charles Dowding talks about this a lot, and yeah, it really depends on what's already there. So, for example, like if you have a bunch of grass, that is one instance where he says, ideally you don't disturb your soil, but they're saying sometimes when you start, you could till that up and get rid of it. You could just literally with some of my plants, I just dug the top layer of grass out and then I flipped it over and just kind of let it start breaking down in a pile. But another method, if you don't actually want to disturb the soil, is some people put cardboard down and the
Mm.
cardboard blocks out the light, and if you put enough material on top of that, he was saying in one of his interviews that eventually, you'll, so say you have grass, you put cardboard down, and then you put maybe 3 inches of soil and compost that you mix together. You could plant a plant in that, and by the time it probably gets big enough, and by the end of the season, those roots will probably have broken through the cardboard and maybe be going into the soil below. And that's a way to kind of start a garden somewhere. In your first year, it might not be the best year, but as you don't work that soil, but you create the conditions in that soil for a garden to thrive. Over time, it will produce.
That's nice. That's good to know because yeah, there's this desire to just go extreme, like okay, there are those like crappy intensive farming practices. I will just go into the forest and plant my orchard there. So yeah, there is this. I get that there is a balance still because yeah, we're dealing with cultured plants and they probably are. I mean, they're not native for the ecosystem that we're trying to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Back to it. Okay. So um, you are saying that you're working with okay organic cultures and with this say regenerative practices. So are there any measures that you add to kind of enhance the natural fertilization practices, or is it like cold turkey, like pure natural farming? Like you just take something from nature, some raw materials, compost that you generate. So you don't use any chemistry, no like catalysts, nothing, pretty much.
I think I heard your question. You were talking about using fertilizer to grow the plants.
Yeah, I'm asking whether you're like where you work at a farm, does it go like fully natural? So there is nothing in the bottle, nothing in the powder that you enhance the soil with. So is it like purely natural? Is that correct?
Yeah, you can do that. The no-dig, the no-till is kind of what we do. If a plant is, lagging behind, or you want something to maybe grow faster, there's some really cool methods that I learned from friends out in Hawaii when I was visiting there. And this would be a really cool thing for anyone that is like you, has this chemist or like science background to really nerd out on. It's called Jadam, Gadam, and it's kind of premised out of Korean natural farming practices. But
Mhm.
basically, it's really simple. It's really simple. Like I used to buy a fish and seaweeds fertilizer, and that's better than some of these other really unnatural fertilizers. But you don't even actually need to go do that. Jadam basically is the premise of it is getting materials that are already around you. So like leaves would be great. Breaking the leaves down, putting them in a barrel, putting water in the barrel, and then adding some type of starch. So people used to use or people did use like molasses, but in some parts of the world, you can't just go to the store and buy molasses, but you need this catalyst to stimulate this, concoction, this brew, this stew that you're kind of making. So you could put in, some people use potatoes or some type of
Mhm.
starch like that. You put that in, you can let it sit in the shade or sit in the sun, and it's going to start breaking down. It's going to start basically creating like a tea, and that is something that is going to be like head and shoulders over what you could get at the store. It's so fresh. It's made with materials right on your land, and you can pour that onto plants that maybe you want to give a little bit of an extra boost. um, Maybe if it's like your first year and you're trying to get these plants going, or you just want to play around with it and see how awesome your garden could actually be. Jadam is a really great one to that's like you could spend a whole day listening to podcasts and interviews and reading articles about that.
Like I'm looking forward, and at the same time, I'm scared of the moment when I actually have my plot of land because it's like oh wow, it will be like stinky and fermenting everything. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm taking notes. By the way, that's really cool. That's really amazing and empowering too. Because many people think that okay, I need to, if I start the garden, I need to go and like buy a ton of powders and stuff. And yeah, and then they get surprised why nothing grows like after several years. They have like poor harvest and
And
stuff
once
like that.
once you start to comprehend what's going on, once you start to get curious, there I met friends in Hawaii that were doing all kinds of cool stuff where they would take I think one of them took like rice or something that was very porous and went out and hiked into the jungle and put it in like I think a nylon sock or something that held it together, planted it, went back like a couple months later or even like a year later, you get that, and then spread it around your garden, and you're basically like inoculating your garden with a whole bunch of fungi and beautiful things that are just out naturally existing in nature. It can be like a really cool way to kind of supplement what is already happening in your soil biome.
So they literally, he like, we worked actually, one of my science projects back in undergrad was my group was working on enhancing nanoparticles with some like drugs or something. So they basically were creating porous nanoparticles that could absorb or take up some like functional molecules and stuff like that. And then because of the properties of the particles, you could like drive them along the bloodstream and some selected tissues. So this is like similar concept, right? So you take porous seed and it's insane.
It's so
It's
fun.
insane. There's so much fascination. I feel like I'm just opening up a whole new world of amusement. That's insane. And in this regard, like I feel like, yeah, you are mentioning like people lost so much touch with nature. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like even like I've been studying some things for years, but I feel like I'm so remote from the ecosystem still. I don't understand many things. I don't feel like a uh, holistic co-creator with the ecosystem yet. And I don't know, like, do you think it's possible to popularize this knowledge? Do you think it's possible to like propel this wisdom? Because I feel like people like before maybe industrial revolution or something. I feel like it took like two generations maybe to lose so much valuable knowledge because like nowadays people just even don't think in that direction.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is a possibility to make this knowledge mainstream somehow?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way that I came across it was really like I have ailments that are inhibiting the quality of my life. I don't want these anymore. I want to give my body what it needs to thrive. I started eating better food. I realized that, when you do that, you're gonna feel better, and the better food you can get, the more it's just gonna help everything. So when I went out to Hawaii and started eating real like tropical fruit or just even stuff I might find here, like foods that could grow here, but eating them really fresh and grown in soil that is just like thriving, it really helps you comprehend like what our food should taste like. And then hopefully if someone's interested, they'll want to say, hey, like, how can I make this for myself? Like, how can I grow this for myself? Because really, once we start to show people that, like, you can do this, it's really like printing money. It's like, it's a
Mm.
way. I mean, what's one of the biggest expenses that everyone has aside from housing is buying food. And if we make growing food cool, which it already is, it's just like we forgot it was. um, I guess to answer your question, I think as people eat healthier, they'll just pay more attention to these plants and these foods,
Mhm.
and then want to be around them more, whether it's like literally in their kitchen or maybe out in their garden. And then we'll just get more and more knowledgeable about what they need and get less out of our heads and more into like nurturing something else. And I think in turn, we're going to learn how to like nurture ourselves better and make this go more mainstream.
Yeah, you said that's very true. I remember experiences. First one was I went to Dominican Republic and there was papaya that was cracking. It was so ripe. It was so potent. Then mangoes were so tasty. I would our fruits all day and they were just phenomenal. And then you get something from the supermarket, you pay like 10 times more and you're like,
And it's not even
It's
ripe. It's like,
it's shame to say. I mean, it's like I always feel so conflicted because I feel like it's the most luxurious food I can get. So I'm feeling like I'm kind of almost splurging. And this is the best food. And at the same time, I cannot say that it's wow. So I guess I feel gratitude for it, but I know it could be better. And
yeah.
then another experience I had was last spring when I went to Montenegro and I went to the farmer's market and I was getting their wild asparagus that was harvested along the riverbank. It's a mountain river,
Wow.
fresh, because it doesn't sit; it just dies immediately. Like it takes, it's very tender compared to cultured asparagus. It's very thin, and so it takes several days. It was fresh. You knew that. And then nettles, I was eating nettles there. I was eating wild dandelions. I was eating like some arugula also that looked pretty like rough rugged. And then and then nuts were so tasty too. They're so fresh and cheap. So everything that was local was so fresh and cheap. And then I had the readjustment. I spent 40 days in Montenegro eating that. Then I come back to the US. I start going to the supermarket. I'm like, my taste buds, they felt like they were numb to that
Uh,
food.
yeah. It's a
Reading
rough
the same
adjustment.
articles pretty much.
It's a rough adjustment coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it always, as soon as you try real food, you cannot go back. I don't think so. It will always haunt you like on the back of your mind that you could do better. So
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going on the topic of that, like, you know, getting more in touch with their food, I think is important and will help make this, something that people will realize is something that's like worthwhile to spend time and attention on. I really feel like I've learned a lot from growing food just in ways that I didn't expect, like to be humble and to share. Like, if you grow a garden, you get so attached mentally that this is all mine, this is all going to be for me. But you realize that Mother Nature is always going to take her cut. A deer might get in, or a rabbit, or
mhm.
maybe it rained a lot and some mold got onto what you were going to eat, and you realize that, like, you got to be humble and you got to share,
Yeah.
and and you realize not to take things personally. If you left the gate open and a deer chopped all your trees, it's a tough feeling, but like, you learned a lesson, and the lessons will be taught until they are learned. So taking being humble, sharing, and like not taking things personally when they don't thrive or they're not coming out the way that you want it, just observing it and moving on, moving forward with that information and doing the best that you can in the future is some like really great things the garden has taught me. Gardening.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I thought about it too, that partially probably the need for this intensive farming came from people not wanting to exercise what you just described. How can you guarantee that you will have this many tons of this kind of produce?
Hmm.
This is how, like with everything, right? People don't want to deal with the sudden and sometimes spontaneous nature of nature.
Yep.
And you try to, like I said it in the talk with Ellie, when we talked about the body and like raw food and how it impacts the relationship with the body. And it was the subject of femininity, but I mentioned that people, what they're doing now is they're trying to put nature in the bottle, put a cork inside, and try to watch nature from behind the glass.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's also in tune with that because it's very difficult to surrender to the spontaneity of nature.
Yeah.
So, and you said that nature teaches you that, but you also teach kids, which is a huge missionary work. And this is phenomenal because you technically catch their imprinting stage of development. So
Hmm.
you give them this knowledge that will become their intuitive knowledge. So they will be, when they grow up, they always will have this foundation deeply rooted in their mind.
Yeah.
And do you notice that children that are introduced to those natural practices, they develop differently? Do you notice like any changes between children that come to you and go through your teaching, your training, and children who live more sheltered, more synthetic lives?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I've had the I've had the experience of doing farm to school at like a large local school here, a public school. And that was my first gig right out of college, actually, was working with a nonprofit here called Sustainable Nantucket. And I did their farm to school program. And it was really, really wild to, for example, we were harvesting potatoes one day. And I was like, all right, we're gonna dig up some potatoes. And we started doing it. And I pulled one out. And this kid, this boy, he was like, he just looked at me like wild-eyed. And he's like, that's where those come from? He just had like no idea that like that was where a potato come from. Like potatoes grow underground. That's where we get them. And it was so cool to be like, yeah, this is how it's done, like this thing that's been in your life for probably years. You got to make the connection of like where its home is and the conditions it needs to thrive. So that was really cool to see. I remember being with students when they saw their first cucumber and like explaining what it is. And it's just like these things we take for granted. And going now, I teach at a smaller school. It's a private school, and I would say the kids are more. I noticed that they're more in tune with like nature in general, like plants. What they need to thrive, and just more curious. Maybe not more curious about them, but I can tell it's been in like a priority for those families to keep that relevant to the kids and bring it into their lives. So yeah, it's really special to be with them and show them like this is how you save seeds. Plant like food is essentially kind of free. If you have the conditions and you save the seeds and you plant it, you can just keep growing this stuff over and over and over again. So it's cool
Mhm.
to show that to the kids, and we've even done that. Like I've bought in some of the hydroponically grown greens, and we'll eat almost all of the butter lettuce, and we'll leave a couple leaves, and we'll replant it, and then it just grows again. And the kids are like, I'm like, yeah, like we just got that for free, like we bought it, but now we're gonna eat it again. And it's really cool to show them just things like that. And that's something that's always been important. But what I really try to focus on too is, okay, what do we do with this stuff now? Like we have all this food, we have all this lettuce, we have all this stuff, but like how do we actually make it fun and make it something that we actually want to, nourish ourselves with? So I show them how to make like smoothies, and we put tons of greens in them. We make soups, and we'll make tea, and eventually I want to do a salad with them. I don't know
Nice.
how it'll go, but we'll put some really nice stuff in that salad. And it's you're right. It's a really impressionable time, and it feels so important to be showing them what I'm showing them. It just feels like it's something that's imprinted in our DNA to me to just show
Mhm.
the next generation like this is what I've learned. This is how we do the thing.
That's so cool. It reminded me, remember, so when my brother was just born, he just learned to sit, I think, or it was first year of his life. And some person, my parents' friend, he let us live at his grandpa was very old. He owned this countryside house with a garden. And so he didn't have any like physical power to take care of it anymore. So he just let us take care of the garden such that it doesn't wither. And so my brother, I remember, those moments when kids get quiet, he was like very little toddler at the moment. And you would sometimes find him. He would just crawl in the garden somewhere, sit and contemplate. Then he would find some bug, start like chewing on a bug, playing with soil. It felt like he was in such a element. It was such a tranquil moment for him.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if you noticed that like children who are introduced to all that, do they like tend to overuse electronics as much, or in general also, you know how there's like maybe falsely diagnosed ADHD in almost all children nowadays. Do you notice like any developmental differences? Like, or maybe there are some kids that come with already diagnosed developmental specializations tests, let's say. Do parents bring such kids to you, or is it not something that you work with?
It's not really something that I work with, but I definitely have students where, like, I'm like a special. I'm like Jim, so I see every student in the school, and
Mm-hmm.
and I see them in groups, and I definitely notice, patterns or or things in certain students where it's like really hard for them to sit down and just focus, or it's really hard for them to, um, yeah, sometimes follow instructions. And it's not a matter, or maybe they're like acting out, they're really like trying to get laughs from the other kids. And I don't see that as like, it's just, it is what it is. I really try to do what Ram Dass talks about with like turning people into trees and just looking at them and being like, okay, that tree is the way it is. You don't have to like judge it. You just observe it. And yeah, I think some of these kids, sometimes it comes down to just wanting connection. If they're acting out or they're really trying to connect with the other students, I don't so much take it personally. I'm just like they're wanting to connect. So I try to divert the attention and connect them maybe directly with what we're talking about rather than talking about doing it. I'm just like, okay. And I just walk over and start doing the thing. And then the kids are like, oh, let's go follow Gary, and like rather than trying to like compete.
Mm.
So I notice patterns, and it's good. It's good for me. It keeps me on my toes, and it keeps me, you know, trying to keep it relevant and trying to like work with them and meet them where they're at, I think is the main thing. It's just like meeting kids where they're at. Cause I know probably some of these kids are eating diets like I had when I was a kid, where there is a lot of stimulants in there. There's a lot of stuff that is just like very overwhelming for the system. And yeah, my mom used to tell me that I was like the little devil boy. I was like so wild, like I was, so I can relate. And I try to meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if you place those kids closer to nature. I feel like so many things can be reversed. Like so many problems can be reversed if you put a human barefoot on the ground and make them eat healthy foods.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful missionary work that you're doing. It's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. You're right. There's some of those same students that are really, kind of a challenge. If I can get them involved or tapped into what we're doing, it's amazing how much their energy can shift from like, wildness to like, yeah, connection and like awe and wonder of like, whoa, like look at this plant or look at this thing that we're doing. It's so cool how it can shift when they get that like that almost that like primordial connection back to nature, like what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I feel like it puts a human in the context that I'm a part of the flow of life. Because a
Hmm.
lot of children, sometimes they get overburdened because with all the pressures from the environment, they may feel just overwhelmed with the expectations, with like being in the center of the world type of thing. But when you demonstrate to them that you're just a part of all this system that works flawlessly without your participation. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's another lesson that's intuitively comprehended by humans generally,
Yeah.
that as soon as you see the flow of life, you feel it, you tap into it, it gives you so much calmness. Because you know that the world will live after me, the world lived before me, and I'm just here to kind of tune in and do my best.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well said.
Thank you. So there is a question, there are two. What about planting apple from your own apples?
Yeah. So we've done this. There's a whole world of a thing called grafting, and that's where you grow one thing, but then you actually like kind of splice or you cut into it, and you can put another thing on it. Yeah. So a lot of apple trees are actually grafts, and they'll grow. The rootstock is what it's called. The rootstock will be a really hardy plant, like maybe a wild crabapple type plant, and then you can graft on maybe a pink lady or a McCowan, or there's so many varieties of apples, and you can literally get to the point where you have an apple tree, and each branch kind of could be its own apple. So you could like kind of go grocery shopping right in your apple tree and have different types of apples. So I guess to answer the question, you could try to grow an apple from seed, but depending on what its conditions need, it might be challenging for it to grow, and it may not have actually grown on those kinds of roots. It's kind of like hard to wrap your head around, but yeah, the apple seed, the apple that you eat and the plant that you plant might not actually be the rootstock that plant actually grew on, if that makes sense. But theoretically, yeah, you could just plant apples right in the ground and get them going. And we've done that with like peppers that we've grown from the store. I bring the top of a pepper in after I've eaten it. And I'm like, look at all these seeds. Let's plant some, and then they grow. And yeah, we grow stuff often that we've gotten from the food we purchased.
It's so funny because you reminded me. I walk my dog just around the apartment complex typically, but we have imagine like asphalt, sidewalks, and roads around, and a little bit of grass in between. So somebody several months ago, somebody spilled cherry tomatoes that they brought from the supermarket nearby. So now we recently had a harvest of cherry tomatoes growing from between the curb and the road, and
Cool.
they actually matured. They actually had berries. So it's
What?
really cool.
Yeah.
Bushes. And I forgot about this. And then one lady that I usually walk my dog with, she was like, "Do you remember that thing? There was spilled tomatoes." I'm like, "I do now," because it's like once the bushes looked like tomatoes, but I was like, it's unbelievable. And then they started fruiting, and I'm like, okay, so the wild magic happened around here. Another question is he raw vegan? I don't know if you can see the chat, by the way.
I see them when they come up, but then they go away. But
I s-
yeah, I've been primarily raw. I'd say the first year I was pretty strict with only eating raw things, and I was really into like, no other animal in the world cooks food besides us, and I was very strict with that. I'd say this fall I've started bringing in steamed or roasted things. Like lately, I've been having winter squashes, which technically is a fruit, because it's anything that has a seed inside of it is a fruit. So I've been steaming and roasting squashes, things like green beans or broccoli or cauliflower, and it's been nice to bring it back in. I can see how as soon as you alter food state, though, like I can feel it. Sometimes I'm eating it and I'm already thinking about the next time I want to eat it again. Like those foods in an altered state could be kind of like low key, a little bit like addicting or very stimulating, I guess I should say. So I guess the term is high raw or like primarily raw, but yeah, I've been mostly raw, like I'd say 80 to 90% raw for the past 2 years.
yeah, that's pretty much probably a majority. It makes sense, kind of.
Yeah.
I myself too. I can say no to lentil pasta sometimes, so
Yeah.
it's really good, especially when I don't have like sprouts on hand and I don't always make them. So I have seasons, I have like seasons of like doing something one, and then I suddenly get tired and I go on something new.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also feel the differences between meals that are not raw and raw. But then what's interesting is that I noticed whenever I eat something that kind of doesn't agree much, like cooked and something that makes me heavy, adding a salad the same day or the next day kind of like salages that condition, and it's also really nice. So yeah, turn into this like kind of opportunistic raw vegan kind of. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I get some omnivorous component to that, omnivorous within the plant realm.
Yeah.
So how much fruit, how much vegetable, and calories?
Mm. So I do not pay attention at all to calories, so I can't really speak to that. But I eat primarily fruit, and especially in the summer, I eat almost completely fruit. I eat a lot of greens, and oh, I can see them now. Top three favorites. Yeah. I in the summer I love tomatoes. I love bananas, and let's see. I really like berries. So those are some of the things I eat the most in the summer. But basically, in the summer, I find it easier to eat mostly raw. I usually, if I could forego breakfast, sometimes that's nice. But sometimes I wake up and I'm just so hungry, I just want to eat. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna have some fruit. I love doing mono meals as much as I can, keeping it simple. But I do definitely make like gourmet, extra beautiful salads with all kinds of stuff. And for the most part, I feel pretty good after them. But I really noticed the calm and the peacefulness after eating mono meals. So if I could eat like mono meals of fruit up until about midday and through midday, and then maybe if I do decide to have cooked food, I'll do it like in the evening, and I'll usually pair it with a lot of greens in a huge salad. Make a salad like so big, it's like, are you gonna eat all that? And it's like,
Mhm.
oh yes, I am. I might eat it in two sittings. I might eat it for like 30 minutes, take 30 minutes off, go work on something, and then come back and finish it. Just so I'm like not uncomfortable. I can still breathe, take full breaths, but mostly fruit with some veggies. And yeah, mono meals of fruit during the day feel really great.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's you go in with the flow eventually, and you find things that work and don't work. I, for example, noticed that I cannot handle tomatoes inside the salad, but I can perfectly handle them on their own. I don't know what the magic is.
Yeah,
I just
maybe it's
can. It screws me up all of a sudden. So I try to make salads without tomato. Like you want something sour in them if you get savory salad. So I usually just add sauerkraut or just vinegar. But like there are some combos, yeah, that mono meals sometimes feel for specific foods especially they're really preferred.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
especially like melons.
yeah. Yeah. Remember we were talking about different like about fermentation in the gut, and that made me read a lot. And I learned that glucose and fructose they kind of get broken down or utilized by the bacteria in different areas of the gut, producing different outcomes, different metabolites that
Yeah,
get absorbed by the body. I learned that actually, yeah, it makes super total sense that if you combine this glucose rich food with something, then you have reaction to happen somewhere. I don't remember above like upstream or downstream from where fructose would be, but yeah, it takes a little bit more time, a little bit different conditions, different pH to
yeah,
break it down effectively. So yeah, those like considerations are important
yeah.
about the
And the
sugar
simpler we
quantity.
eat and the less food we eat, like we can really start to notice these things. If we're having these huge meals, there was so many different things. It's hard to know how it really felt. But this summer I got really into eating deconstructed salads. So I would just have like a bowl or a plate full of greens, like maybe a whole pound or a whole bag of greens. And then I would cut up tomatoes, I would cut up avocado, I would cut up a cucumber, maybe a pepper, maybe a mango. I love mango and tomato together. They're just so nice together. And I would have everything that I would put in a salad, and then I would just sit there and eat it with my hands. I would have a little greens,
Mhm.
tomatoes, greens, maybe a little mango, maybe avocado and greens together, and I would just eat it with my hands really slowly, and it just felt really, really good. I don't know. I really got into doing that this summer. Eating with my hands feels really cool. I've heard that you gain information on the density, the moisture level, the weight. You get so much information when you're touching it with your hands.
It's
And
yeah, it's very true.
yeah, I find that really enjoyable. But now, nowadays I still do both. I still love mixing a salad up and making it really just beautiful, big, lots of things. But then some meals I'm just like not, like last night it was the first time in a couple months where I did my deconstructed salad again, and I just ate it nice and
Mm.
slow, and was great. So just paying attention is the best part where I've learned the most, just paying attention because really nobody can learn how something affects you better than you do.
Yeah, that's very true. And this is why it's very difficult sometimes. People approach me as like how to can I eat this, can I eat that, can I do this, can I mix that, and I'm like, and some people will say that, oh, this is hard to digest, you shouldn't do it, and I'm like, dude, I know what I can digest, what I can digest. I've been in this process for like several years of exploring what sits well, what doesn't. So, and in how much, in what quantities it sits well and what doesn't. So, yeah, that's a very individual thing. And the only tip in that field that I can give is literally to observe, of course, educate on what can potentially trigger certain reactions in the body.
Hmm.
Like my grandma, for example, she cannot be near a tomato because she gets super swelling. She has super allergy to tomatoes. But some people will have like lesser reactions to certain things, just
Right.
tolerance to certain things. Plus, also our genetic makeup, where what our ancestry is, because there will be some analogous plant that will have certain like level of certain proteins that may not work well with certain ethnicities. That's another factor to consider. So it is work of self-exploration that no one will be able to do for you, and it will be so individual and also depend it will also depend on your background nutrition, like, because I know that some people heal allergies, food allergies, they would be like not able to eat a strawberry on normal diet, but then they go on raw diet and they can eat tons of strawberries without problems.
Yeah. It's true, and sometimes it depends on where you're at in your healing journey. Like one of my biggest ailments that was plaguing me when I was in high school and younger was heartburn. That was like one of my biggest symptoms of like my body was like warning, warning. That was like my bell or my alarm that was going off on my alarm panel. And stuff that used to give me heartburn doesn't give me heartburn anymore. And I think when we like bolster and we strengthen our system, we're not static beings. We're changing and we're healing and we're shifting. So just because something was one way when you were younger, it might not be that way anymore. So keeping an open mind to that, and yeah, just continuing to heal yourself and experimenting.
Optimization, always optimize.
Hmm.
So you mentioned it already, so why do you think raw diet had some like impact on your health? Like what do you think are the major driving aspects that make raw diet different in terms of healing? And another thing that I wanted to ask: did you try any other dietary systems? Because there are so many diets that are like named after influential people that
Yeah.
exist and that people hop on and they're like, is it like Atkins protocol compliant? So there are all those things. Did you try any of that? Like, what do you think what do you think makes raw diets superior for you specifically? And I mean, many people can benefit from it, of course, as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've tried a lot of different diets. I used to love eating meat. I was really into eating meat. I loved cooking it. I loved like picking out the best meat I could find. Um, so I used to eat a lot of meat. I used to think, that's like our food. We should be eating that, and I believed what people told me, and so I've definitely done that. I've eaten like a lot of rice. I heard that like especially like sushi rice and different types of rice were really easy to digest. I grew up on a standard American diet. Like I was wrapping cheese slices around hot dogs and dipping them in ketchup with like eating coffee cakes for dessert. Like I was eating all the stuff that, is not our food. But I've eaten a lot of different diets. I just kept refining. I kept removing. I kept saying, okay, how can I feel better? And I always kept an open mind. I feel like people's identity gets attached to how they eat. And I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay open because my baseline level of suffering was so high between having heartburn and other symptoms. Like I was really into bodybuilding. I used to be like way bigger than I am now. And I had really swollen joints that just were hurting, and I was losing sensation in my hands. I would pick stuff up and drop it because I thought I was holding it, but I wasn't. So my baseline level of suffering was so high that I just said, I don't care like what I prefer to eat. I just want to find out what I can eat to feel the best right now. And then if I want to bring that stuff back in my life, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But like I need to get to this really beautiful place that I know exists so that I can heal and feel better. Cause like I might love the taste of animal flesh right now, but like after I get to a place where I'm healing and I feel awesome, I can make a more informed decision. Is that actually a treat? Like, does that actually make me feel good, or is that appropriate for me? So I went on a journey. Yeah, I went on a journey for sure. And then when I was working at a dispensary, actually, I was working growing plants at our island's first cannabis dispensary. My friends were opening a raw vegan place across the street, and I started eating more and more meals there, and I just felt so good. They were making me this incredible food, and I just felt better and better and better. So they were a big influence on me. But to answer your question on like why, I think eating raw is so important. I think one of the biggest things is this word called autolysis. Have you ever heard of that word?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I read this experiment done by, I think it was a Russian scientist, and I can't remember his name, but he basically took two frogs, and one was cooked and one was raw, and he put them in either exactly was digestive juices from an animal or it was a simulation of digestive juices from an animal. And the one that was raw like dissolved so almost completely, and the one that was cooked really didn't change all that much. It really wasn't broken down all that much. And I was like, that's so fascinating. And I didn't see it in person. There weren't photos. It was just like text. So I can't vouch for how like accurate that actually is. But just the thought that, you know, basically the premise of it was there are enzymes in our food. I'd always heard, the enzymes are so important. Don't kill the enzymes. But I never really knew like what does that mean, And once I comprehended the fact that we are so conditioned to think that we eat food and our body just acts upon it. Our body takes it apart. Our body does all the work. That's kind of what we're told. But this invitation of thought was saying that food is not just passive. It actually, it's if its enzymes stay alive, it actively participates in its own self-destruction or its own self-dismemberment. It's like a dance it's doing with our body. And that makes so much sense to me, that if something is still living, there's information in it that can take it apart.
Mm-hmm.
It can take itself apart. And once I started studying wellness and realizing that the premise of almost all disease is accumulation of waste in the body and it affecting the lymphatic system, I was like, oh, so if we're eating a bunch of food that has lost the information on how to take itself apart, it makes sense that it would start accumulating in our bodies. So kind of a long answer, but I've tried all different kinds of diets, and I just naturally came here, and I love it. And I'm just like it changed my paradigm on what actually is a treat and what I enjoy. And I think that word autolysis probably made the most sense to me on why raw is so important.
Yeah, so for our audience, autolysis is self digestion of a cell. So you can, I think, if you break down the cellular membrane or something, then it releases enzymes that kind of dissolve the cell structures. I think that's how it works. So this is autolysis, and actually our body has this process going on as well. So our cells, they self annihilate upon certain conditions. That's how we regenerate. So autolysis is, yeah, is a property of living tissues, living cells. They can self digest.
Hmm.
Yeah, this self digestion. Yeah, it's interesting because I I noticed the speed of digestion. I noticed the energy level. Like again, I have to say that you eat a salad, 30 minutes passes when like it goes down your intestine. You can work out. You eat the equivalent. Like I mean, I eat like what if I probably desiccate, it will be a very little, a small amount of food, so it's mostly water, so it's hard to compare with other conventional cooked foods. But let's say sauteed vegetables also will be filled with water. Eat those, and you're like, man, it gets a little bit less energetic because your body starts spending extra resources on that, and then if
Yeah,
you do it continuously, then it gets compounding effect and so on.
yeah. I think
So
another important two other things that were, I think, really kind of pillars in of like why I ate raw was I love being in nature. I love watching nature and really observing that no other animal on the planet cooks their food. And you don't go out in nature and see an overweight deer or a deer that or whatever. I keep talking about deers, but you don't go out in nature really often and see animals with ailments. Animals often get ailments when they become under our stewardship, whether they're in a zoo
yeah,
or they're in a house and we're feeding them cooked or altered food. So that was another thing. Like nature doesn't cook things, So why would I? And then I just had the other one on my mind. Oh, water content. Water content's so important. Um, I remember reading about how it was theorized that like water, whatever you eat, it needs about 80, I think 80 to low 80% water content to move through you. And if it doesn't have that, it will take water from you. Yeah. So if you're cooking the water out of your food and then eating it, you're losing those enzymes, you're decreasing the water content, which is just going to dehydrate you because it's going to pull water from you. And yeah, the more raw I ate, the better my bathroom trips were. Like that's such an important part of this whole process that people don't always talk about is the elimination. And like when you go to the bathroom and you just let it go and you're clean as a whistle, you just come out of there like smiling and satisfied in a way where like I must be doing something right, you know?
And flat. Whoop.
What's
Very
that?
well done. And flat. Like whoop.
Yeah. Hmm.
Very agile and like, yeah. Actually, another question I had, and that our conversation feels so perfectly. It's cool, like it was orchestrated.
Hmm.
But did you do any supplementary detox practices, or was it just gradual transition to raw that was contributing to healing the most? Because I know that there are, like, my personal school of thought is to gradually ease into raw diet through like whole foods, through maybe like cooked foods, and then gradually substitute, and then bring your body to the level where it can safely digest all the raw foods without any like turmoil.
Yeah.
But I know that there are more extreme ways of transitioning when people say that, okay, you like from your standard American diet, you go on a juice fast and then you do like enemas, and stuff like that. So, did you do any like detox on top of that, or was your healing gradual and came through just gradually going into raw diet?
I would say gradual. Yeah. I was really hooked on what I was eating. And I could see with iridology that my internal terrain was um, I was very congested. And I knew that if I hydrated that really quickly and started stirring it up, that I could start to feel really bad before I start to feel really good. And this was where studying regenerative detoxification with my teacher, Haley Porter, she really taught me how, like, you need to keep your eliminatory channels, or you need to encourage your eliminatory channels to open. And the analogy was like, if you have a fish tank and it's dirty, you can clean all the water, you can switch that out. But then maybe once you start really stirring up the rocks on the bottom, you'll see all this waste come up. And if the filter isn't running, it's going to start to recirculate and you're going to be swimming. The fish are going to be swimming in their own waste.
Mhm.
So that really helped me comprehend that like I probably should go slow. I did end up using enemas. Multiple people were telling me about it. And I was kind of like, I don't know, I don't know if I want to do that. It didn't seem very natural to me. But the way that we've been eating for decades is really not natural either. So once I started doing enemas, I saw so much waste coming out of me that I just was like, this is helping me. This is helpful. It didn't feel like it was harming me. I would feel really good afterwards. And there was a period where I really kind of, for I think at least like a year or two, maybe 3 years, where I was really doing enemas pretty regularly, sometimes like multiple times a week. But nowadays, with how I eat, if I do one, honestly, not that much really comes out. I think it's just that like we're eating
Makes
in
sense.
such close alignment with what we should be eating that like things are just naturally moving. And
Mhm.
yeah, but I've never done any long juice fasts. I've heard of them, I've contemplated it, but it feels like it would be a little too abrupt with my body, a little bit too like, "Huh," like just
Yeah.
do it, just let go of that stuff. It feels like I might not have a good reaction with that.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel the same way, and I made decision for myself that if I feel like I need to do it, I will do it. But I haven't had an urge to actually do it yet. And I know that many people struggle to come out of them because they feel so hooked on the liquid foods. But we also discussed that actually I'm a big proponent of chewing food a lot because I
Yes.
believe that our teeth, our jaw, it's imagine our jaw sits in the head. This is a place where like very close to our brain. I feel like there is such a connection to that. And if you don't use this, if you don't
Mhm.
use your jaw joints, muscles, lymphatic nodes, you don't pump them. I feel like it's kind of on the unnatural side. And knowing that people do get addicted to non-chewing, not chewing, they do get
Mm.
addicted to juices. I just don't want to risk it per se. I know that there are so many reported benefits, like some anecdotal evidence, right, that shows us that it may be beneficial, but I don't feel it's true to me. I'm
Yeah,
just I would supplement with juices, maybe with green juices if I needed like boost in my mineral intake or something.
yeah,
But replacing food with that, not ready.
yeah. I like the idea of keeping all that, everything together and kind of digesting it together. Like I did somewhat recently, a couple months ago, I did 10 days on just grapes and melon, but I didn't ever juice them. I just ate them. I think the most I would ever do is maybe if a melon was really like, you get a honeydew melon or a watermelon, you're like, oh man, this isn't like the most ripe. Some of those I might blend and drink them, but I didn't juice the fiber out of it. I kept it mostly together, and that was probably one of the most drastic things I did. But I
Mhm.
did that when I've been like multiple years into this lifestyle, and
Yeah.
I just bought, and the local grapes here were in season. They're called fox grapes, and they're seeded. And yeah, I ate as much grapes as I could from the wild and from the store. And a couple nights where I was like, I felt like people don't really talk about it, and I feel like there's sometimes an emotional detox sometimes too, where you get these feelings that come up that normally you might have suppressed or numbed out or distracted yourself from when you go to eat. So there were definitely a couple nights where I was like, like I need something. And to kind of stay the course, I remember eating bananas and romaine. I just ate like quite a few bananas, and that gave me that density, I guess, that my body was really needing, or
Mhm.
maybe it was more my mind. And that was the only thing aside from grapes and melon that I ate within those 10 days. And it was a really cool. I went into it where my goal was 5 days. I was hoping for 7, but I wasn't forcing myself. And I eventually got to the point where I just felt so peaceful and so okay with what I was doing. I was getting a lot of sun from nature, where I just was like, I want to keep going. I want to do 10 days. And it was one of the coolest experiences I've done. It was way easier than I thought it would be. But like I said, I'm into this lifestyle for multiple years. I've been doing a lot of work on this and eating less and less dense food, but that's probably one of the most dramatic things I've ever done.
Mhm.
And yeah, one summer I did a 4-day fast where I didn't eat for 4 days, just because I was like, I need to know what this feels like, and that was also really wild. I don't know if you've ever done anything like that,
No.
but yeah, by the fourth day, it was cool. I felt really almost like I was having like a mushroom experience where my mind felt very like, whoa, but my body felt very, very tired. I was very, very tired. I was trying to do the work I needed to do. And it kind of was like, okay, this was a cool experience and I learned a lot. And I might have detoxed, but this isn't something I can sustain. The biggest thing for me is like, can you do what you're doing in a sustainable way where you can keep living your life? And if I try to do a really long juice fast, I just think it would kind of upend my life. And I have too many people relying on me to be doing that type of thing.
Yeah. I like the concept of like make yourself more than food. So for me, it's a priority. And what I try to deliver on my channel is that yes, food is very important. Yes, healthy habits are very important. But let's find something bigger than that that defines us as a person beyond food. Because I feel like we came for expressing our creative potential primarily. And while food is like of immense importance for that, but when you start getting absorbed in like, what do I eat? How do I eat? How much do I eat? How much do I not eat? What do I drink? What I don't drink? And it becomes your sole uh, factor, like that determines your identity. And so it's already like disordered eating, I think. So I
Yeah.
hear you on the subject that I have other things to do than to just like passionately, I don't know, like fast, experiment with things
Yeah.
because yeah, you have other prior commitments. Let's say.
Yeah.
There's a question. So there are certain foods that can't be eaten raw, like yam, or cannot be eaten raw. They can be very tasty. They taste like carrot and pumpkin, kind of. Foods that can be eaten raw certainly must have certain nutrients that are provided when cooked. Thoughts, comments?
Yeah, there's a guy, I don't know what his name was, but the premise kind of on my on what I've heard is like if you need to cook it, it's not really meant for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've made soups out of raw squash where I took a really hard winter squash and I cut all the skin off with a really sharp knife, and it was really hard and challenging, and I blended it warm to touch and made a raw soup. But I can't remember if it gave me a lot of gas or not. But in general, I think when starches have been converted to sugar, they usually can cause bloating, especially if you mix it with other things that might want to travel really fast, like a tomato or something with a high water content.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to stick with, like, if I need to cook it, it's really probably not meant for me. With that being said, I do, like I said earlier, I do have cooked winter squashes sometimes, and I've heard that things that turn sweet when they're roasted are more easily digestible and eliminated. And that's where I think I learned some of that from Arnold Ehret with the mucusless diet healing system. And then their other question was about things being more available. Yeah, I don't have too much to say about that. I mean, I think some stuff is available when it's raw, and then as we know, some stuff is lost when it's not raw, and other things might be more available, but I don't think too much on that. I just try to think, am I eating fruits and vegetables, and hopefully they're grown in nutrient-rich soil. But I don't think too much about, like, is it destroyed or is it available? That's not something I think a lot about.
Yeah. It's I was while we were talking, I was like part of my brain was imagining like Whole Foods like produce section. And I'm like I literally shop, I think, in every bin that they have in the produce section. And
Yeah,
maybe except for potatoes that I anyways don't like eat much because I don't like cooked starches. Some of them are harmful, like heavy on the liver actually. And
yeah,
and eggplants, I really I really don't even like it's so basically everything besides them can be eaten raw in the produce section.
yeah.
So that's why I'm like struggling to pinpoint anything like what would I want to eat that is not edible raw. So yeah, I feel like there is such an abundance of foods that can be undoubtedly eaten raw that trying to find some exotic examples of what cannot be eaten raw is a challenging task.
And there's even some things like, I don't eat a lot of them, but I mean, at one point I was really relying on legumes, things like chickpea, like garbanzo beans, chickpeas, and those we're told, oh, you have to eat it raw. You get a raw dried chickpea, and you're like, there's no way I can eat this the way it is now. But if you soak that and sprout it over a couple of days, I sprout my chickpeas where they have these big, beautiful long tails, and it's still living, but it's in a completely different state. So that's one
Hmm.
thing that is I think is really great sometimes is sprouting, where we can make things altered but not with heat, with like
Yeah.
sprouting.
Sprouting makes like chickpeas and lentils a totally different food than their boiled counterparts. For
Yeah,
example, like my marker, I healed migraines on raw diet. That
nice.
was just like it runs in my family. It comes from my like neck being broken during like being born. And so I have vulnerability spot and raw diet eliminates the flare-ups of that. And what I know is that boiled legumes, given that there is some other irritating like trigger factor, they will give me migraine. Sprouted lentils they taste like grass. They seem to lose all those like harmful proteins that trigger inflammatory reactions. So
Yeah.
it's just two different foods. They're drastically different. So sprouting is my, of course, go-to. But again, I told you I'm a lazy right now person, so I make lentil pasta, which with salad doesn't disturb me.
Nice.
Salad like helps to salads are diuretic, so they remove the swelling.
Hmm.
Salads have a lot of fiber, so they kind of slow down the release of the proteins that may disturb you. So they help.
Yeah.
But sprouts are definitely my go-to if I
Yeah.
was to like literally tap into what makes me feel better.
For sure.
Sprouting is the thing, yeah. So then let's probably answer the questions, and then I really want to talk about iridology because this
Okay.
is again a super interesting thing.
Yeah.
So, do you have tips for beginning farming in colder climate, fruits and vegetables? By the way, check out Gary's apartment. Gary's background is so amazing.
A lot of bananas right now.
It's like jungle in Massachusetts.
Yeah, yeah. Growing in colder climates. Um, yeah, the growing season for most things is pretty short, so it gives you a lot of time to daydream and think about what you want to grow. This time of the year, though, there is stuff that can grow. Right now in our garden, at the school, and at home, greens can do pretty well. I've got like romaine and kale and chard, miner's lettuce. There's a lot of greens that actually prefer the shoulder season. So in the summer, they're actually kind of like it's too hot for greens. They'll do this thing called bolting. Well, they'll go right to try to flower, and they won't make a lot of the leaves, which we want. So this time of year, people grow carrots, people grow kale, and like I said, a lot of different lettuces. Um, so there is stuff that can grow, but um, the other tip I guess I would have is if you do want to grow stuff that is going to be harmed by frost, you could do things like I have a couple beds that I built where they're a hoop bed. So I put some PVC piping and I bent it over, and I put greenhouse plastic over it, and that basically gives a barrier so the frost can't kiss the plant and kill it. But that works, but it's just kind of sad at this time of year because there's less. The biggest thing that we have to pay attention to is the daylight hours. So even if you heat a greenhouse and you build the structure, you heat it, or you keep the frost away, stuff is still going to grow pretty slow because there's just not that much sun coming in to help it grow. So I guess my tip would be like really start planning what your garden is going to be after your frost date ends, and get really good at growing stuff in the growing season. So get really good at succession planting. So if you want to grow cucumbers, cucumbers don't really, I mean, in most cases, don't grow indefinitely. They're going to produce for maybe a couple weeks, maybe like half a month or two. And so when you put your cucumbers in the ground, maybe 2 to 3 weeks later, start some more in trays or start them somewhere else so that when those cucumbers get tired and they're like, whew, we did our thing, we made the fruit, we made the seed, we're ready to propagate. You'll have these other ones that you started, and you can really maximize your growing in the season. So succession planting is really key, and just planning out your garden in the growing season. But if you do want to grow outside of the season, build structures or grow things that, do your research and grow things in your climate that can tolerate the winter where you are.
Just challenging, pushing like Canadian borders. Like I'm just looking outside right now. It's a very brown landscape.
Yeah, you're up there.
Um, yeah, I'm thinking. By the way, can you like you can grow so many microgreens indoors, and they actually have pretty superior properties too. So this
Yeah,
may be an option for people who are trapped in those climates to
yeah,
literally put like bins and grow microgreens indoors because if you want to get some superior and concentrated nutrition.
yeah, totally. You can grow on like shelves in soil, or honestly, a lot of my greens, my microgreens, this is fenugreek, alfalfa, and red clover are some that I sprout the most. You can sprout these right in a jar, and
Mhm.
they'll you can grow stuff right on your counter. And sometimes, like, when I've lived with other people, I do multiple sets at a time, and you can pump out some serious sprouts just right on your counter if you time it all. So like when these are done and I'm transferring them into the fridge, I'll start my next batch so that by the time I finish what's in the fridge, I just constantly have fresh greens that I don't need to go to the store to buy.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, inspires me to resume my sprouting season because
Yeah.
I miss them so much. You know, it's interesting. I like tried to pinpoint the premise for me getting drawn to like in general health and well-being. And I remember that my mom, when I was 5, we had some like difficult circumstances financially and so on. So my mom literally didn't have money to buy food for herself. I was going to the state kindergarten, so I was getting food for free there. But my mom didn't have food. What she was doing, she wasn't like buying junk. She was going to the market where they sold seeds, like foods for animals, and including seeds for birds. So she would get wheat germs and she would sprout them, and
Yeah.
that's what she was eating. And she was the healthiest. She was literally thriving off the sprouts alone. We lived in an industrial city with super bad climate, super cold. She worked at the school, subjected to all possible sneezes and coughs from kids,
Hmm.
wearing no hat, open jacket. She was pretty young. She was 25, so reckless lifestyle. She was walking like that, never a single cold, nothing, looking like a model. So
Wow.
that was a season. I remember I tried sprouts. She was like, "Kids shouldn't eat this." I'm like, "Man, okay, do it." And I was devouring them. They're so good, so
Yeah.
nutritious. So sprouting runs in our family.
Yeah. You gotta run it in your blood. She was sprouting wheat germ.
Yeah.
Yeah, wheat berries. You know who you and maybe other listeners want to check out? There's a woman named Anne Wigmore, and she popularized this drink called Rejuvelac. Have you ever heard of that?
I think is it Karen Calabrese also does that? I don't remember. No, it's I don't know. You
Yeah,
mentioned it, I think.
yeah. So Anne Wigmore, there's probably lots of people that do it, but Anne Wigmore really was a proponent of it. And basically, you sprout wheat berries or wheat until it grows a tail. And then rather than leaving it, like normal sprouts, you keep rinsing it, and it just grows out of water. The wheat, she says to grow it until it's sprouting, and then put it in water and leave it in water on your counter. And it starts to develop this kind of fizzy, it's a fermented thing, kind of similar to like kraut, because I know you're aware of like the vitamin K2 that's really only in animal flesh or made by bacteria. So she's really into Rejuvelac, and that's what a lot of these like artisanal vegan nut cheeses, that's how they get that like really cool flavor, is they usually make Rejuvelac and then they add it into their cheeses, and it gives you that like fermented taste. And you
Yeah.
could take it out after 3 days. You could wait like 7 days; it'll get stronger. But I'll put that on salads sometimes, and then and she even said you can get multiple batches. So maybe after 5 days, pour it in a jar, save it, put it in the fridge, add fresh water, and you can sometimes get 2 batches of Rejuvelac out of one set of seeds. But she says it's like, so she's a really big proponent of it, and the fact that your mom was eating that and thriving, I mean, those are two pretty solid testimonials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You inspired me to try that. You see, I freak out sometimes when I think about fermenting because I'm like, I want to have a microscope to see that I didn't grow anything malicious there. So, like household, like the normal, like lab grade microscope is something that I really want because I have such an OCD sometimes to really trust that whatever cultures are produced are cultures that are edible safely. I have this OCD, so I want to image them to see
Yeah.
that what I need because what if I grow something crazy, some like crocodiles there? And so this is the only thing that prevents me sometimes from going fully in fermenting.
Yeah.
But it sounds awesome because with vitamin K2, there's literally one culture that produces decent amount of it, like the content that you get from animal food.
Yeah.
No, it's not even that. It's hundreds times more. To be fair, it's natto beans, and they have some specific bacteria that produces it. Natto beans. The concept sounds pretty crazy because it's like imagine crispy rice or like treats that are gooey.
Mhm.
It's like that, but made of soybeans and fermented. So imagine
Ah.
how delicious it looks. Those like stringy things of something fermented. Oh, so now with you inspired me so much for so many things. I will have to sit and do my research afterwards.
Mhm.
Start some exciting things. So with iridology, before we
Yeah.
go to in the weeds, and then we'll return back to other questions. I saw your photographs on Instagram and we had some brief discussion about that. And you saw the changes in the map of the iris in your eyes after you underwent some detoxification process.
Yeah.
Like, how does it work? I know that there are some, like, usually Eastern methods of diagnostics when people, like, for example, they can tap into some energy flows, they can look at your tongue, at the skin of different patterns. So they identify, like, just by visual evaluation of human, they identify certain possible ailments. But then, like, I've never really looked or heard of the studies of the iris. And how does it work? Like, how does the iris become the map of the processes that happen in the body? Like, why? And in general, like, is it like location specific where you have certain deposits? Like, how does it look? What would you like look at first, like when you analyze an iris?
Yeah. So if anyone's ever seen, including you, if anyone's ever seen a reflexology map of the most common one people know of is the one of the foot. There's like a map of the foot, and you can see like this is kind of where your heart is, and there's a
Mhm.
map of that of the eye. So there's a whole map of like what you see and how it
Mhm.
course and where it relates to the body. So the area I usually look at with people the most or first is really tight, close to the pupil. This is kind of like the center of your body, your bowels. And this is where a lot of people's, if they're having disease, this is where a lot of the source is from. And then basically, depending on what one you're looking at, for example, the left iris. Let's see. Yeah, sorry, the right side of the iris would correspond to like the right side of your body. And
Mhm.
so you can kind of even see locations. You can see the liver, and basically the brain is up here. You can see the lungs on the outside. You can see the lungs on the outside. You can see someone's whole body from the inside, because really the eyes are the only external part of the brain that you can see. And if we think of our peripheral nervous system, coming
Mhm.
down and branching out from our spine, it goes to every corner of your body. It goes to your fingertips, it goes down to your toes, it goes out, everywhere. That all connects to your central nervous system. And that bundle of wires, that bundle of nerves basically comes up into your brain. And then your brain is like, it splits into both your eyes. So basically it's almost like a cross section of,
Mhm.
you can think of like our central nervous system. So it's the external part of the brain. And what we really mainly can see, we can see the organs and stuff, but we're looking at people's lymphatic systems and what level of degradation or congestion they might have. And this usually starts with acute problems being white, then they might turn like yellow. And I'm speaking for a person with blue eyes. People with brown eyes, it's different. It's kind of it's different. It's just not as obvious sometimes as what you're looking at. But yeah, congestion usually goes from like white to yellow to orange to eventually brown or black, and that's when it's like pretty chronic. Sometimes, like for me, I have a lot of brown congestion up in my brain, and
Mhm.
some of that might not have actually been accumulated in my lifetime. Some of that might have been inherited from my parents. So when you look at someone's eyes, you can kind of get an idea of the congestion level of their internal terrain and then where it might be accumulating in their body. And it gives you a really great where you want to focus your attention on, like what part. And it's even really cool because like sometimes you can even see it's kind of like a map of someone's life. Like in some ways, if they've been through trauma, you can see that it'll register in their eye. Like one of the stories of how people kind of discovered iridology. Some say it's been around since like the Egyptians and whatnot, but um, I think over in Europe it was used to evaluate horses and falcons and stuff like
Mhm.
that for people that traded birds. You could look at their eye and see how strong their constitution was. And one guy had a bird who broke its wing, And as he was looking at the bird right after it broke its wing, it got a mark that appeared in its eye. And he was able to be like, whoa, that is from this injury, and that part of the eye must relate to the wing. And I feel like I could just keep talking on and on and on about this, but I had a friend that had cancer that returned, and instead of doing the traditional route that he had did that failed, that is offered by most institutions, he decided to work with an iridologist. And he said, you have a lot of congestion. You would really benefit from fasting on grapes. That would really help clear a lot of this out of you. And he said it
Mhm.
ended up saving his life. And that was when I first heard about iridology. And I was like, I'm going to look into that and see, you know, just see what it's about. So the more and more I studied it, I just became fascinated, and I had so much compassion for myself, and it made so much sense why I was having so many symptoms that I was having. And um, I just could keep talking on and on about it. Like, your right eye is your paternal eye, and your left eye is your maternal eye, your mom. And my dad had a really tough life, and I was able to see that, like, I probably inherited a lot of like just burden that his body was under, and I was able to have not only so much compassion for myself but for him. And yeah, so there's like the mechanical aspect of like, this is here, this is there, and then you can get really like spiritual with it. And like, uh there's just so many different ways people can kind of interpret what you see.
That's fascinating. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because yeah, I've never thought about the yeah, we have like super huge bundle of nerves coming from the eyes to the brain. And I remember I was doing this meditation that actually focused on that area. And that's when I became aware of them, but I never connected the two that you actually have this continuous pathway of nerves going through the body and related to, I mean, it's all branches like lymphatic system, blood vessels, and nerves. They all branch in similar fashion, but
Yeah.
never connected that with the eye. And in general, like, what is the tissue of the iris? Like, what is this pigment? Why does it become like? I mean, how is it composed? I want to read about it. Like, what are the cells? Like, how do they become filled with something? What is this substance that stains them in a certain way? Like, because I like to break down things that make sense and make them very material. It's like I always was like drilling people's brains like being in the university because like okay, we're studying the computer, but what happens, how is memory stored? And then I learned that okay, it's electrons that go into some excited state and stay there, for
Yeah.
example, right? Or they like if we look at quantum computing, it's like spin of electrons. So this physical representation, some abstract concepts.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious like what actually sediments there and why.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think some of it can be, is like medicine that we've been given. When I was younger, I was eating way too much dairy.
mhm,
I was really congested often, and I thought that I was sick, and I took a lot of antibiotics. And I even had my skin was breaking out, and I took antibiotics for that. And I took a lot of antibiotics, and I think sometimes that can be what accumulates, is like medicine can accumulate in the tissues. But some people believe that food can even, like, biologically, like inappropriate food can be stored. Um, but yeah, it would be really cool to like deep dive into what is happening on the level of knowledge that like you have, with like the scientific structure and the materials and the things that could be accumulating. But in general, I just have studied like what the colors can mean and
mhm,
what level of stagnation they can represent. And then just basically being like, you have a lot of stagnation in your head, try to support your head and detox. But really, a lot of what I recommend to everybody is like doing all the things, eating more plants, eating less cooked foods, eating foods that are easier to eliminate. Like, a lot of the recommendations are the same, but knowing where it's accumulating sometimes can really help you and validate your experience that your physical body is feeling. Like, I had an enlarged, I didn't know it, but I took a blood test when I was younger, and my liver was slightly damaged. And
mhm.
I don't really drink. And I was like, I wonder why my liver's damaged. And then when I looked at that part of my eye, I could really see stagnation. And that was an area of my body like I really needed to support. So basically the bowels are in the center, and where a lot of people's issues come from is their intestines become so burdened that
Mm-hmm.
that the toilet starts to overflow, and the toxins seep to different parts of the body. And then we are told, oh, you have sinusitis, or what is it, sinusitis, like a sinus infection, or you have appendicitis, or you have, they basically use the area where the vulnerability is showing itself, and then they add situs, which is inflammation. So like a lot of people's issues, we've been taught like that it's just that area, like this is just affecting your ears. But iridology says a lot of it is coming from the bowels and just basically seeping out into different parts where we have our vulnerabilities. Like, for example, one of yours was your neck, and you were experiencing it in the form of like migraines. For me, I was having a lot of heartburn, and yeah, it just starts to really make sense when you make it. It's really quite simple that a lot of our issues come from our bowels, and then when you can see the waste seeping out, literally like through someone's eyes and where it's collecting, it it really starts to help you comprehend like what you need to do to help your symptoms go away. Work on
Mm-hmm.
work on your bowels. Eat more appropriate food, make better food combining.
Yeah, that's really curious. I want to now do experiment because I know some like areas that are vulnerable in my body. I really want to see now. It will be super curious experiment because if I see correlations, I will be blown away, and I
Mhm.
think I will.
And the
So yeah.
sooner you can get pictures, the more you can track your changes. Like, I'm really glad years ago I took pictures, because as you saw, like things are changing. It's like it's so validating. It's like, woo, this is working. Like, let's keep doing this. It's really worth it.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's super cool. It's again, I love all those self-diagnostics because I know that, for example, I get like spots on my nails, right? There's some like different features. I know that okay, I gotta change this nutrient intake. I'm like noticing that okay, like for a month I've been eating something, and that might have had some impact. So I learned to correlate those things to adjust my diet, to adjust my habits. But there are certain subtle things too, and I feel like I might still benefit from something. So it's really interesting that we talked about it. So there is a new person joined. Hello, good to see everyone here. Likewise, we're very happy that you joined. We just discussed the subject of iridology, and we learned how to map your physical conditions with your iris. Gary was talking, describing how to use this map and what it can tell us. So there are some other questions. What are the best, I guess, the worst raw vegan mistakes?
Hmm. You want to take that one?
I can, absolutely can.
I'd love
Raw vegan
to hear
mistakes
it.
is to not know, to not actually build the knowledge base of the all foods that are accessible to you, is to fall into like okay, like to get on the high of detoxification and forget about actually supplying enough nutrition. So that will be a big mistake, to completely dismiss the analytical tools and going just on some spiritual path that of the diet. And there are many things, and then also trying to use someone's blueprint without listening to yourself. It's not bad to take someone's experience and apply it, but if you are completely oblivious to what you are actually feeling, then it's not a good idea. So we need to build the intuition about, like, you need to build some pattern for intuitive eating on raw diet. Then some other things is to develop there are dangers, not even mistakes. There are actual dangers when people go and again they do everything that I just mentioned. They forget about getting essential nutrition, and they keep detoxing. They think that they need to keep detoxing, and then we know the cases when people actually wither and die. Becomes eating disorder when you develop like OCD, when you need to like keep cleansing, and without any like particular purpose. That is another dangerous thing. I think. Then some other dangers or mistakes, I think that's it on my side, because as long as you know the fundamentals of nutritional science, as long as you're working on building functional microbiome, as long as you are transitioning comfortably and eating diverse diet to actually harbor nice bacteria in your gut such that you can get all the benefits from the diet and so forth, you should be fine. But
Yeah.
it's a constant process of learning, because I remember it took me several years of passive learning about this diet, of why it is good. But then as soon as I started doing it, I'm like, okay, I was overlooking omega-3 subjects, so I was kind of shifted towards omega-6. So I started being more mindful of taking omega-3. Then each of those things, it branches into its own subject, and then also you need to map out all the minerals that you need to be getting. How can I maximize the intake of them? That is also important thing. You can also overlook something if you don't study. Then pretty much all of those things. So the best thing you can do to be a good raw vegan, to be successful raw vegan, is to learn and listen to your body's needs, and not through a prism of some competition with someone, because you can see that, oh, this person is on a challenge. He's like drinks like million liters of juice per day and fasts all the time and eats air and sunshine. He's better than me, so because I am eating something. It's not
Yeah.
true. You're fulfilling your body's needs, because you're built. People are built to eat like any other biological form on Earth. So it's not particularly natural to dismiss the need to consume food still. And yeah, going on some competition with some influencer in who eats less, who eats cleaner, who eats better is another danger, I think, that you can face. So you need to always listen to your needs, and use analytics, some scientific insights as your tools in navigating that process.
Yeah.
Because another thing that I like to mention is that if your body never, for example, never tried collard greens, but your body doesn't know to harvest certain nutrients from collard greens, so your body will be having some weird desires or something. So you will not know to harvest nutrients from certain foods if you don't try them. So this is why it's important to right away introduce as many foods in your diet as possible, such that your body can build intuition for what to ask for. Because right now, for example, after 3 years on this diet, I know that, okay, suddenly crave, let's say, this type of nut, or I'm suddenly craving this type of greens. So I go to the produce section, I'm like intuitively drawn to certain greens because my body knows what to want.
Yeah.
Then it satisfies something and I'm good. And I move on to something else. So this is how, like, the, the structure that I like to follow.
Yeah. It's a good structure. I would add getting a plan in place, because making any kind of change like this, it's going to feel rocky sometimes. And your plan helps keep you steady when things get shaky. And keeping enough food around that is going to help you get towards the direction you want to go. Like if you're switching over to eating mostly raw plants and you don't have a lot of raw plants in your apartment, like you might be more prone to ordering takeout or eating something in your house that you still weren't planning on eating. So
Mm-hmm.
making a plan and setting yourself up for success, and that kind of piggybacks into what I would say is maybe not. I would encourage people to work with people that, either a friend or a family member or a coach, someone who's done what you want to do, but also getting your information from multiple sources. So maybe not just wholeheartedly following one book or one person, and getting your information from different sources. And yeah, reading books, reading books, getting information from people who took the time to publish it and didn't just share it in a quick second on social media. So that I found that really helpful. And finding community is really important. I think one of the mistakes I made was trying to just do it kind of alone. But I found community online. I joined raw vegan groups and met people. I met a couple people in person, and we get together every now and often and we share a raw vegan meal. And having community is really helpful. I think that can be kind of overlooked sometimes. Trying to do stuff alone can be really challenging. So those are some of the tips I would share.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I can agree with lots of them. And yeah, information harvesting is like in research anywhere, like you go sitting down and start harvesting for information on what has been done, what exists, what's already existing knowledge is one of the probably daunting tasks on the one hand, because you kind of want to reinvent the wheel, kind of you want to do something extravagant, like it's relevant for me mostly. I love to like I will be the first one to do something, right? But then you need to sit down and humble yourself and read what's already in the body of literature. This
Yeah.
is very important, yeah, and diversifying information and weighing it, because we know that especially in nutrition there will be articles on Google Scholar that will say that this is true, and then there will be articles proving that this is not true. And you really need to be very, very meticulous in actually reading the experimental conditions, in the considerations made in the study, what they referenced, what previous studies, and so forth. But it often happens that the connection between the two conflicting pieces of information lays on some overlooked hidden factor. So you need to start researching more. So you need to see in which conditions this holds true, in which conditions this holds true. And you find for yourself how to design the approach that would kind of bridge the knowledge between the two and work for you. In the end of the day. So
Agreed. Agreed. And meeting yourself where you're at. You said something earlier, I can't remember what it was, but it made me think of this where like just not going too fast, too quickly. You know, if you've had these eating habits for decades, they're not going to change overnight. It's unrealistic to think that this is just gonna you're gonna eat
mm,
completely different. You're never gonna eat those foods again. Like I transitioned very slowly, and like if I still wanted to eat animal flesh, I would find the best that I could, or if I still wanted to eat bread, I would find the best bread that I could, and you know, acknowledge that this is something that I eventually want to phase out of my life, but not getting myself to a point where I feel deprived and like I'm going to binge on something like that. Like being gentle, taking your time, and knowing your why is underrated too. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Write it down, put it on your wall.
yeah, by
Because
the way, it's a huge.
when it's challenging, you're gonna. It's the thing that's gonna help keep you on your course and know why you're doing what you're doing.
Mhm. Because yeah, I struggle a lot, especially what traumatized me recently was this death of that girl who had eating disorder, and she was like everywhere in all media, just claimed on that story and said that raw vegan diet is this and that. It brought me to the state of put me in the state of being defensive about my diet to myself. I started trying to justify that it works, and I started focusing on things that may be deficient, which actually did because
Mm,
something happened. Because I started like researching a lot of things that I may have been overlooking, but at the same time, I started literally like forgetting all the beauty, all the benefits of this diet. And eventually you also forget how good it feels, how good you feel right now compared to what it was. So
yeah,
sometimes it's actually beneficial to have a meal from your past,
yeah,
eat it and see how it was. And
hmm
that will show you the difference.
yeah,
But then another tip that I would give is if you have some craving, try getting full on foods that are well calculated, that are raw and nutritious. Usually it solves all the craving. Like in my case, for example, I can be hungry for something like avocado toast or something with some processed meat, delectable. But I
hmm
know that I haven't had my salad yet, and I know that after a salad, I don't want to eat anything.
yeah.
I'm full. My body is nourished. My body says that I'm nurtured.
So
I don't need
true.
to eat. So
One of my favorite teachers would say, if you're not hungry enough to eat an apple, then you're not hungry enough.
that's
Sometimes,
mom right there.
yeah, sometimes it's like, do you want it? Like, do you really need to eat? Or are you just trying to entertain yourself with like mouth stimulation? Like, are you really hungry? Yeah, so I agree with that. Like, really taking inventory of your urges and desires and being like really sitting with them before you act upon them, and checking your blind spots and just being, being gentle with yourself, but also like kind of calling yourself out when you're being a little foolish and being like, no, you're not hungry. You don't want to do your paper. You got to go write, or you don't want to go work on that thing. You just want to start
Mhm.
eating something instead.
Yeah. That's where concept. I like this concept of two-step thinking when you focus on the immediate consequences of your actions. Because yeah, it's like a chocolate will melt in your mouth for 5 seconds. The consequences of chocolate will last a day, 2 days.
Hmm.
Wake up and like you will wake up with zits or something the next day. It will be like have sugar crash the next hour. So it will have this long lasting delayed effect of just like let's say with 1 minute of indulging in a chocolate bar. And so our food, yeah, food takes us what 2-3 hours per day we eat. So 20 hours per day, including our quality of sleep, is impacted by those 2 hours of eating. And so just weighing the concentration of weighing their impact on quality of life, not impact, but like the contributions to quality of life, it's really worth sometimes to sit and think, yeah, are you aware of what you're doing right now? Because that can literally shift the course of your entire upcoming day, for example.
Yeah, it's true.
There is another question. What are your thoughts on cruciferous vegetables? I feel I get conflicting information on that. I'm currently mainly food based. However, I worry about minerals and I wanted to get your opinion. Do you have a strong opinion on cruciferous vegetables?
Oh, you want to go or should I?
I don't know if you have a lot to say, go ahead.
Um,
Because I
I,
eat them, I love them. I'm Russian. I'm cabbage lover. My dog is cabbage lover. We sometimes like split mini cabbage. I give him a half to chew, and I eat another half. It's just like neck and neck.
yeah, I took a long break from them, and now I'm eating them, and I don't notice any like repercussions that are enough to get me to stop eating them. I do have some of them steamed and roasted, and like you said, some of them I have raw, like cabbage. I don't have them every day, and I don't eat a lot of them. Some of those greens and cruciferous stuff. I'm thinking more of like greens, like chard and kale and spinach can
Mhm.
have kind of like defense chemicals in it, like oxalic acid, and I think they're called. I might be mixing it up, like phthalates or oxalates, I think, and they can kind of fight against us a bit. And if you eat them every single day, it might not feel so great. But if you have them sparingly, they could be giving you, like that person was saying, they could be giving you nutrients that you might otherwise be missing out on. But I eat them, just not so much. I eat them more sparingly. But how about you?
I eat so I usually my base green is dandelion. I love dandelions so much, but then usually my salad consists of dandelions, then collard greens, then chards. Actually, I eat chards like recently a lot. Then I eat a bunch of parsley, like a ton of parsley and the dill and kale. Um, those are pretty much. Sometimes I buy broccoli. It's like not the broccoli with the crown, but just broccoli with flowers and a lot of leaves, so leafy broccoli.
Yeah.
So I do cruciferous vegetables, and in terms of oxalates, I was once not confronted but asked on YouTube about oxalates. I did research. I found that oxalates are really like business for our microbiome, and a lot of gut bacteria just split them right apart. So in a healthy body, oxalates are not a problem. It's usually if we take, for example, a meat eater who has like high uric acid and start feeding them chards, that's good luck because they will build uric acid stones, and uric acid also promotes oxalate stone production. And and plus they will have poor gut microbiome because they will be mostly pathogenic flora, right?
Yeah.
Limited. So that's the important consideration. Like, is your metabolism good? Is your gut microbiome good? Do you not have any factors that would enhance the rate of or not or catalyze the formation of oxalate crystals in your body or not? That concern, I kind of came to conclusion that I shouldn't worry about. I shouldn't
Yeah.
because I know actually when I was 20 years old, I had I did some ultrasound because I had like lower back pain and fever and nothing else. So I went to the doctor and they gave me an ultrasound like of my like pelvic area and the kidneys. And they found actually when I was 20 eating like normal diet, they found some inclusions in my kidneys, like kidney sand. They're called sand, but some like
Yeah.
mini stones. So I had that without eating anything with oxalates before.
Wow.
I don't know what it is now. I mean, I don't want to like undergo like any procedure like irradiating necessarily, but it would be curious to see what happened to those.
Yeah.
Diet. But other than that, cruciferous vegetables they're different too. I mean, leafy ones will be much more benign than some party ones because I know that cabbage, for example, it can kind of make you not burp, like make you heavy in the stomach. So maybe finding your types that you can handle really well. Collard greens are the easiest. They're very
Yeah.
cool to do as like wraps and stuff. They're large
Yeah.
leaves. Kale is also different. I like dino kale, partially because it sits well in the fridge. But
Yeah, yeah. Same. I've been having some of that locally grown, and I think you make a good point. I think depending on what what your gut biome is doing, it might affect you one way, and then maybe like for example for me, a while ago I would kind of avoid those foods, but I haven't really noticed anything that I would say is showing that they're bothering me. I'm just still like
Mhm.
wary on them, but my biome is totally different. And I think you're right. I think sometimes foods can affect us one way, and then when our body changes, our reaction to those foods can change as well.
Yeah. So it's again also individual story. You know,
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
there you will find that you will find millions of articles on how good they are, and then you will find some handful saying that they're the most evil thing. I remember Shane Sterling was making a video about not eating cruciferous vegetables, and it caused some uprise in the community.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that nobody should eat them or that everybody should eat them. So, and then I crave savory in the evening. It seems even though I crave fruit near lunch, I have been mainly raw for 5 years. However, I think I don't need enough calories when I'm completely raw. I think I need a plan. Here is depending on the approach that you're leaning towards. I did what? I was again. I have not OCD, but I tend to have like phobia of doing something wrong. So I was like, okay, there is science, and there are like recommendations for nutrition that we need to hit per day, right? So I took Excel table, I made an Excel sheet, and I put all the essential nutrients that we need, all the vitamins, minerals, essential amino acids, omega 3, omega 6, calories, macros, stuff like that. And I designed the diet like with all the foods that I know, found that like hemp is very important in my diet. I added seaweeds to hit certain mineral goals. Omega like DHA, DHA is not contained in most plant foods. We can convert LA to DHA, but the conversion rate is pretty low. Depends also on the health, on the status of the person, of course. So I introduced a lot of things through that matter. And I evaluated my nutrition. I added some functional things. But the basis was I started with the recommended daily values for every nutrient, and this is how I designed the diet. My diet currently is like plus minus 2,000 to 2,500 calories. And if any raw foodist, no, not any, but some raw foodists look at it, they will say that, oh, your diet is bad because you eat like a lot of seeds, you eat some nuts, you eat so much fat. I eat a lot of fat. And sometimes I go in more like low sugar diet. So high fat, low sugar. Sometimes I go on higher sugar, lower fat. And so I swing between those. But on average, I do hit this over 2,000 calorie diet, over 2,000 calorie metric. I often hit it. But again, the means through which I do that, some raw vegans will severely disagree with me because again, I eat a lot of fatty seeds and nuts. That's what I do. But it seems to work. But could
Yeah.
be better. Maybe I don't know about it. Maybe I'm on the track somewhere.
I remember being really impressed when I learned that you mapped everything out in that way. That's really thorough. I'm gonna take a quick moment to go use the toilet. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'll go fill the cup too.
Okay.
By the way, the stream interrupted, and I'm not sure if it saved the previous portion. It will be such a bummer if it didn't. Let me check real quick because we had so much valuable information, and I am just not sure about it. So this one is live right now, but it shows on my phone that we've been only 12 minutes in, which doesn't make sense. I hope it's saved. So where can I find information? So hopefully it will be accessible to you guys.
Oh, it got really hot.
Yeah. I was just discussing because my thing interrupted 13
Really?
minutes ago. Yeah, and I'm hoping that it's saved.
Ah,
So I'm like checking on my laptop if I still see the. It seems like according to the number of views, it makes sense that it's saved. It was one file because I
cool.
want people to see our discussion. There's so many stuff, like so many informative things in the beginning, and then people joined in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
So commercial break, yeah. Unfortunately, on real guys, it's very hard to advertise anymore. It's like so minimalistic, so the essentialist lifestyle, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Not like some makeup or like skincare reviews where you have like myriads of items to propose to people.
Mm-hmm.
So we really like as raw vegans we usually advertise effort and discipline, which is like forced products known to human. So yeah, about the plan. So some person was going to die, but they're alive. Good news. I'm just reading through the comments.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I agree that's important because animals tend to know what they're meant to eat and what nutrients they need. I feel we have been clouded by cultural norms as to what to eat and what we require. Precisely. When people talk about intuitive eating, it's always very funny and cute because you even don't know what foods exist on the planet sometimes. When you
Yeah,
know, go to the store and get a box with some refined items inside and some synthetic thing, it's not intuitive. Your body doesn't have intuition to nourish itself through it. You need to really like bring up the education first and the well-roundedness about what exists in order to be truly intuitive eater.
sure. Yeah, you don't know what you don't know until you bring it into your awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In some of the dreams or somewhere, I was saying that an ignorant person cannot have free will. We all will be ignorant to some degree, to some limit, but I feel like it's honorable thing to expand the areas of our knowledge and the extent of our knowledge to push the boundaries of that ignorance. Of course, there will be limits, natural limits, because we don't have time to encompass everything that exists on the planet. But yeah, you're right. In the world where everything is so muffled, when we have such a information attack, and it's like such a garbage information for the most part, we really don't have moment to sit and tap into something profound and important.
Yeah,
So yeah, and that's why many people just don't have free will because they don't know their options.
yeah. And they're not staying open to the fact that maybe what they thought is not as it seems.
Yeah. It's like sometimes I get like comments on whatever media about this lifestyle is trash, this lifestyle is dangerous. There was this again, I had this thing like the blogger was eating this way and they died. And I'm like, what do you know about this diet? Like, first, tell me what your knowledge is about this diet. What is your knowledge about nutrition? Let's start with that. Because if you're coming from the place where your knowledge is, some like pop articles, some commercial articles in some magazines, that's one story. Are you willing to hear the knowledge about this subject or not as well? Because yeah, many
Yeah,
people are close to certain knowledge, and it's normal.
yeah, yeah. I like to say to people, I used to eat a lot of meat, and I can speak from a place of like I'm doing this now, and I did something different before. So like I'm speaking from a place of awareness of what it's like to live both ways. But like,
Hmm.
have you tried what I'm doing yet? Well, then
Yeah.
if you haven't, you don't really know what you're talking about. You can only regurgitate what you've heard or what you've read, but I'm speaking from two different embodied places where I was living it.
Hmm.
So until you do that, you don't know. Like I have friends that I could never give up meat. And I'm like, well, you're speaking from a place where you've never tried it. If you try it for a month, like see what it feels like. And then your whole perspective, your whole paradigm can change where like you could have new thoughts and new feelings that you never felt before. But until you try it, you'll never know. So it's fun to remind people that sometimes when they come at me that this isn't the right way or blah blah blah, as if there's like a right and a wrong way. But it's
Yeah.
I like to remind people of that. Like I've done both, kind of both. Or what am I trying to say? I hate to like narrow it down into just two routes, but
Hmm.
yeah, we both have tried another way, and we're doing this, and it's easier to talk to people who have actually an embodied experience of it rather than just what they've heard.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. Sometimes it just yeah doesn't make even sense to express your opinion about anything because you know that you're dealing with projection. You're not dealing with sincere interest to learn about it or to expand knowledge. It's a lot of people they build the strong opinions and then from that when you cling onto strong opinion you close out all the possibilities of learning and that's another thing is there is some pride so like I was thinking about the term pride because many people say that oh you must be proud that you're doing this you must be proud that you're so disciplined but I find it that when you feel pride about something that's when you probably are too focused on the fact that you're doing it and this closes you out from the rest of the things that come that may that so it closes you out from further expansion in life kind of because if you like fixate on this proud of your opinion of your deity it's like it becomes a very closed system and that is why probably pride is considered like deadly sin because it literally it impedes the development of a human in so many ways.
Yeah,
And this is why being opinionated and settled on a certain like opinion is so dangerous and dysfunctional oftentimes. So and then yeah, when you feel pride about doing something, I don't feel it may be even true to yourself because I feel like if you're doing something that's true to yourself, it's just true to yourself. You don't feel any emotion about it, pretty
yeah,
much. You're just content and you move on. It's like you said that yeah, I have other things to do in life.
yeah,
So you don't sit and dwell on that. Oh, I'm doing something so great.
yeah.
Oh,
Like, would you still do this if you lived out in the woods by yourself and nobody knew that you were doing it?
yeah.
Yeah, I would. I would. I'm not doing it for a reaction out of people. I'm doing it, for myself. Don't get too caught up in like the vanity or the yeah, your view of yourself, or I don't know. I agree. I
Mhm.
think it's stay focused on your
Yeah. Yeah. And then they evaluate, like, makes my life better. That's all. So it's just nature. It's natural thing. And then, yeah, and that makes you kind of so neutral in your attitude towards like what others do, what others think about it. It's a really helpful thing. It's really good marker of how functional and true to yourself lifestyle is. When you stop bringing your opinion out there, trying to school anyone from just having very important and strong view on something.
yeah,
So That's really cool. So I think we probably should wrap up because it turned out to be a pretty long talk.
Good.
We even had a biological break. So I'd like to thank you so much for so much valuable information and inspiration because particularly on me, you had a strong impact today because I'm just going to set and plan out what I'm going to sprout. And you rejuvenated my dreams of having a garden and how I would approach it because it's such a fascination that you can take a plot of land and literally produce your own food, build your own mini economy there.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool stuff. And iridology, yeah, I will probably first thing I'll do, I'll go to the mirror, to be honest.
Yes.
So I'm really hopeful that this stream will save because again, it is super valuable, super enriching, and I want as many people as possible to tap into your knowledge. And another thing I would like to say is that all of your media outlets will be in the description for the video. I will put them somewhere in multiple spots such that people can access them. And yeah, I'm really happy that we had this conversation, and I'm thankful for all the audience questions as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Great questions. And thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to curate this and put it together. And I've had a good time reflecting and learning from each other. It's been really fun.
yeah, it's just really enjoyable. Yeah, thank you so much,
You're welcome.
and have a nice day. It's already over 2 p.m.
The day is moving.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. See you.